Hi, my name is Simon Howard and I'm a Solutions Architect at Micro Focus. So this video is all about the process or workflow, if you like, that you would follow when you're working together as a security and development team, addressing the issues or reviewing the issues that have been raised as part of a Fortify on demand static scan. What you see in front of you are a list of applications that have been scanned, that's these results here, on a demo tenant that we have. There are 109 applications that this tenant knows about. And I'm going to quickly go and segue to one of them called riches.net enhanced. This is a quick shortcut to them, or to it. So here it is, and straight away I know that in the scan I've just done, and I want you to imagine you've just scanned this application, there are 8 critical issues and 10 high, no medium and no low level issues. This is how we categorize issues in Fortify on demand. I'm going to drill down and look further at those issues. So in this page, the releases page, I would see a list of the releases that Fortify on demand knows about and their scan status, if you see what I mean. So in this case, there's a version 1.0 and these are the results as we said earlier. So I'm going to quickly drill down now and look at the critical results. So in this view, which is called the release issues view, I see on the left hand side a column where I group my vulnerabilities, in this case just the critical issues, but I could click that to look at all the issues. I'm grouping them by category in my case. I like doing it that way, but I could group them by other ways like OWASP 2017 categorization. I'd see A1, A2 and so on. But I like this way because it makes it easy for me to work out the type of vulnerability that's occurred. Now in this central area here, what we see are 6 tabs that relate to a particular selected vulnerability. In this case, it's currently selected the first one, which is a cross-site scripting issue. And then an audit column, and then some filters I can select if I wanted to filter down further. So I want to look at 2 of these issues. The insecure transport database issues. Now this is an ASP.NET project, by the way. So it's a mixture of ASPX files and also config files and also C# code. Right, so there are 2, as this little button here tells me, issues of this type, the insecure transport database type. And they're both in the file web.config, one at line 4, one at line 5. I'll select that one. You'll notice that the central area changed the text in the vulnerability tab. And what I would typically do when I'm going through the results, someone owns the security, the AppSec for this application. It could be somebody in a separate security team, or it could be someone, let's say such like a development manager, or maybe even the team lead. Depends on your structure of your organization, but somebody owns that. So that person is probably who's going to go through these results initially, probably in this web interface on Fortify on demand. So I would look at this typically and look at the vulnerability tab and think, okay, is this a vulnerability or not? I may or may not know what this type of vulnerability is. So I typically read the summary paragraph here, which gives me an overview, the explanation paragraph, and I'll scroll down. Now, and then I might look at the code itself. I can do that here. I can click this tab and I'm here. And now I'm looking at the code. And I'm kind of thinking now, depending on my role, I need a developer to look at this really, but I think it might be an issue. So having done that, and you do the same process for each vulnerability, I will decide what am I going to do. So I've got 2 options basically. I could, if I've integrated this project, in this case it's the app, and it's called riches.net enhanced, I could have integrated this with my bug tracker, JIRA or Micro Focus ALM, for example. We support a number of them. And if I've done that, then this grey button here which says submit bug will be not greyed out, it'll be enabled. And I could click that, I get a little diagram appears, I can raise a ticket for one of these issues, this one here, or in fact both of these issues, many as I like actually. And then the ticket is generated in the bug tracker, and then you can follow your normal process for addressing issues. However, I'm not going to do that in this video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to audit it, and I'm going to assign it to one of the users on this tenant who happens to be a developer. Now, I'm going to have 2 hats on in this demonstration. I'm going to be a developer and I'm going to be the security auditor as well, if you like, or dev lead. So I'm going to assign it to myself, that's me, and I might put a comment something along the lines of please investigate or check out, whatever it could be, right? I'll click add, and I'll do the same thing for the other one too as well, because actually these two are closely related. So again, we'll put me, or the developer in the real world, and we'll put please check. And that will get added to the history information for this particular vulnerability, which is accessible in several places. Okay, so that's it done now. And the logical step now is to actually go and triage those vulnerabilities in another environment. And typically that would be your IDE, so I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so this is a ASP.NET project, as we said earlier. So the logical place to do that is the Visual Studio IDE. So I have that running already. So let's bring it up. And this is the project that actually the source code originated from, which is riches.net, slightly different name to that on the tenant, and that's perfectly acceptable. So how do you go and triage those results, or view the results and make changes and so on? So this is what you do. So the first thing I need to do is make sure in my IDE I have installed an extension. It's called the Visual Studio extension for Fortify on Demand, or Fortify Demand Visual Studio extension. So I select extensions and updates, and I come to this page here. So I already have that installed. It's actually this one here, Fortify on Demand extension for Visual Studio. But normally what I would do was I would select online here, and then in the search box I would search for that Fortify on Demand extension name, and I will find that and install it in my environment that I'm ready to rock and roll. Okay, so I will have relaunched Visual Studio, and what I'll see then is this menu item here which says Fortify. So in this next stage of this workflow, what I want to do is to actually look at the results. So I do that by selecting Open Analysis Results. I go through a little wizard. I define in this little field here, this text box, the URL where my tenant exists. We have 4 data centers currently across the world for Fortify on Demand, and they're in different regions. I'm in the EMEA region. We would tell you that when you do a POC, or if you've got a production FOD tenant. So that's where mine is. I define that once. Then I define the tenant ID. So mine's called EMEA demo for this purpose of this demo. And then you'll have a username and password. You'll have an account that you'll need to provide the credentials for. So I have a password manager off screen here, which I'm just going to use now to quickly sign in with. And then I'm going to click next. And now Fortify, this extension rather, will connect to REST APIs on the Fortify on Demand service. It did that really quickly, as you saw, and that grabbed a list of all the releases of the applications that the tenant knows about. So I'm going to scroll down rather, and I'm going to look for my application. So the application was called riches.net extended. There it is there. I'll just expand this window so you can see that. And it's version 1.0. So I'm just going to click finish. Now I'm pulling the results using those RESTful APIs. And you'll see already some new areas or tabs being created in front of you. They are analysis results, analysis trace, issue summary, and audit summary into your Visual Studio environment. And you can see here in this analysis trace tab that it shows me a breakdown of vulnerabilities and issues that I saw also on that tenant if you looked at that. And so I have 8 critical, 10 high, 18 in total. So what I want to do as part of this process now is look at these vulnerabilities that have been assigned to me. So there are 2, as we saw earlier, and they are in web.config on line 4 and line 5. Let's select one. And what you see is that now I suddenly have in front of me the code for this. Now, here's a gotcha, which is that when I do this, what I'm actually doing is pulling in a snippet of the code, if you like. It's not the full source code file, and you'll see that in a second. And it's highlighting the issues, in this particular case, that occurring at line 4, and there's also line 5 as well. Now, we didn't really talk about that, but let's look now at what would happen. So I'm the developer, and I want to understand, well, is this a vulnerability or not? So I'll do this in roughly this sort of way. So I go look at the issue summary tab, and that issue summary tab has a details and recommendation subtab, if you like. In the details tab, it breaks down, the text breaks down into an abstract section, which tells me, well, what is a this type of vulnerability. What is an insecure transport database issue? I may or may not know about that, depending on my experience with Fortify, my security experience, and my development experience. But the format of this section is always the same for any vulnerability. It will be an abstract, give you some guidance, some explanation with some examples in the particular code language that was scanned, and some other information down here which we won't cover right now. And then there's a recommendations tab, which tells me, well, given this might be a vulnerability and not a false positive, this is how you would typically fix it. Now, you know your code, right? You're the developer, you know this code, and you're going to get a feeling from the information that we provide to you, is this a vulnerability or not, right? So in this particular case, let's say I've decided that already. It is a vulnerability, and I've read through this. It doesn't matter, by the way, for the scope of this video, whether this is or not. Well, it actually is, but I'm not expecting you to read through this text here, but you can pause, of course, and do that. To do this fix for this issue, what I need to do is to secure or encrypt the communication to the data source that's used in this application. So I can do that by simply adding this here, the encrypt equals yes. This is very specific to this change. So I'm going to cut and paste that, or copy and paste that rather, and I'm going to modify the code. But wait, this here is actually the snippet of the code. It's not the full code file. Now, the rule of thumb is that when we select an issue like this in this analysis results window, you will get a file that will appear in front of you, and it's the original file suffixed by -downloaded. So the real file is actually my project. So I go to Solution Explorer and find the file web.config. So here it is down here at the bottom, and I'm going to open that up. Now, if you look, you can see this file has quite a bit more source lines of code rather than the source file, 69, whereas the one that was downloaded has just 20. It's a snippet, right? So I need to find these two lines of code in the code. Well, that's quite easy to do in this case. There they are, lines 23 and 24. We will provide enough information around this snippet so you can work out where it is. Okay, so it's here, and there's my connection string. As you can see in the example, we talked about connection string here, and I just want to insert what I've copied here into the code. We'll put a space there to make it easier. Semicolon, paste it. There we go. Right. Okay. Save it using Control S on my PC, and now that's done. Now, in a real environment, you probably have several issues, assigned to you that you might triage, fix, whatever in one go. Your options then, of course, are that you might commit those changes to your source repository, whatever you're using, and then you will then maybe have Jenkins or some other CI tool, and you'll have integrated that with Fortify on demand. That's easy to do via plugins, and then either on commit or nightly, your code will be rescanned using FOD. But another option is available to you, which we're going to do right now, which is we're going to scan it from FOD right within our IDE. So to do that, you basically select Fortify, upload projects to Fortify on demand, and then we go through this wizard. But before we do that, there's one key thing I want to show you, and that is really we should create a temporary release so that we can keep the baseline scan that we did on version 1.0 and create a new one which will start. You and other developers might do rescans using that release. So let's go do that. Okay, so to do that, what we need to do is to go back to the tenant. So we'll go here and we'll go to the tenant. So let's go back to this particular page here for the application that shows me the releases. And this is the releases view, and I'm just going to create a new release, and we'll call it something like 1.1 beta or something like that. You can use whatever sort of notation or whatever that you use. We'll call it 1.1 beta. Okay, and I think I put a semicolon rather than the dot there by accident, so I'll put a period there or dot, and say which shows it is in the development life cycle, it's in development state. We don't want to have that selected because otherwise that will copy the vulnerabilities details into the new release. Sometimes you may want to do that. And now we've created the new release. We'll go back to the page we were on. And now we're ready to do a scan. Okay, so let's go back to the IDE. And now we want to do that scan. So let's go back again and select Fortify, upload projects to Fortify on demand. Now, let's go through this wizard here. So there's a tree view in the center that shows me all the files that Fortify on demand extension has found for your solution, your project, if you like, or solution really. And it could be a case where you might have unit test code in your same solution. And you might not want to scan it, of course, because you might have vulnerabilities that you don't mind are in the actual unit test code. So you're not distributing that, so that's okay. You might say that. So if that's the case, you can, you deselect a folder that might contain that unit test code. In my case, I don't need to do that. I'm going to scan everything. Then you've got two ways of doing this. So I could select Save Package Locally. I would click the Browse button and then specify in my system where I want to locate a zip file that will contain the source code and binaries and any dependencies. We call that the payload in a zip file that we upload to Fortify on demand using, well, you can either do it manually using the Fortify on demand web interface, or you can use a tool that we have called Fortify Upload, which is a jar tool you can use in a command line or in a script. So that's one way of doing it. But what we're going to do is we'll use this option instead, which is upload package to Fortify on demand. So what we're going to do is we're now going to package together all the source code into one in a minute. But first thing we need to do is specify where we're going to upload this to. So in this page, we find our application again. And a release that we want. So it's riches.net enhanced. And you'll notice it now says it's found the release that we want to use for our new scans. So 1.1 beta, I select that. Then down here, I want to potentially set the assessment type. Now, because this has been scanned already, I don't need to do that. The bottom line is you can do single scans or subscriptions, and you can do static or static plus. That's beyond the scope of the difference between static and static plus in this video, but the thing to know is that typically in this environment where you're doing multiple scans, you will have a subscription, meaning you can scan as many times as you like in a year. I define the technology stack. Now be aware, although this is an ASP.NET application, I actually want to select ASP here, because if I don't and I select .NET, then the extension will look for PDB files, and there won't be for this type of application. If it was a C# .NET application, yes, absolutely would do. PDB files are used in order to help us in a debug build, in order to find to you better where the vulnerabilities are in terms of lines of code. So the next thing we want to do is select the advanced option here, or rather expand that out. And what we want to do is make sure this audit preference is set to automated rather than manual. I will quickly tell you why that's relevant. So basically, if you did have a static plus subscription, then you could go for a manual audit preference as well, meaning that that in addition to the automated part of the scan being done, which actually consists of two parts, where the code is scanned by a scanning engine and also then analyzed by a tool we have called Fortify Analytics in the back end, which removes a lot of false positives. After that, in a manual scan, also there's a third stage where some manual security auditors manually look through the results looking for false positives. So they remove potentially further false positives. In this case, we don't want that, and typically in the CI environment, you wouldn't want that. So you will basically have this set to automated. So then we don't want this. We'll leave this checkbox unchecked. Click Next. And now we're packaging together the source code, the binaries, DLLs, whatever, and the dependencies into a zip file. And now we're transferring that zip file up to the Fortify on demand service using an endpoint and using RESTful APIs again. And now that's finished. Click Finish. Now we go back to a tenant. And now we will notice, hopefully, if I refresh this page, that the scan has started. And so it has. So I know that because instead of having a grey icon I had here, now we've got this blue icon, and that tells me when my scan results are expected. Now be aware that's a maximum date when that is expected, and it, if you like, because there's a sort of a time window we estimate when it'll be completed by, it will complete much quicker than this because this isn't a huge code base. So we'll come back in a few minutes when it's completed, and then you will see the results and what's happened. See you there. Okay, welcome back. The scan has completed. It's for version 1.0 beta. And as expected, the results for the critical have gone down from 8 to 6 to fix 2 issues. And incidentally, wonderfully, the results, the number of high issues gone also from 10 to 7 as well because of a knock-on effect. So we want to be able to go as a developer, my hat on now for that. I want to go and mark these issues in the audit process as being remediated. So to do that, I would open up the results for the previous scan. And of course, I might have looked at the results for 1.0 beta within this, but I'm going to pretend I did that within the web interface. The developer did that. I'm going to select the previous results. I'm going to click Finish. And here are the 2 issues that I previously resolved. We know we resolved them. And I'll select one of them and I'll show you how you basically mark that as being fixed. Okay, so there's 2 places I could do that. I could do that in the Audit Summary tab down here, or I can do it by checking it. I'm going to decheck that one, kind of do one of them. And I'm going to select Audit Issue, and I'm going to change the developer status to Remediated, as opposed to Will Not Fix if it wasn't an issue, or Third-Party Component if the issue was in the Third-Party Component. I select Remediated, select maybe put a comment like I fixed this, let's say, and then click Save, and now it's marked as being remediated. So now all I need to do now is go back to the web interface. Okay, so what I want to do now is I've got the audit hat on, and I want to basically mark these from an auditor point of view as being not an issue anymore. So I would go to this release where the issues are. I could do it up there, by the way, from the application. And I'm going to select the 2 issues. I'll do one by one actually, one of these 2 actually, not that one. Select web config, that one there. You can see if I look, I'll pick up on decheck that. You can see it's marked as remediated. So is this one. What I want to do for both of these issues now, from an auditor point of view, I want to mark the auditor status as being not an issue. So just quickly recap on what this means. I could suppress it if it basically it's been accepted as a risk, is accepted. But in this particular case, these 2 issues were fixed. So I can mark it as no longer an issue. It's effectively what that does. Submit the changes, and that's it, done. Close. And those 2 issues will now be suppressed. That's it. See you in the next video.